Today we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So this is new information, so please feel free to stop the video, rewind it, follow along with this video as we're going through just with a separate sheet of paper, and let's dive in. So the quadratic formula, we will get real solutions of the quadratic equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 using this formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we'll get real solutions where a is not equal to 0 and b squared minus 4ac is greater than or equal to 0. So this thing right here, this is actually called the discriminant. So it's everything that's underneath the square root. It's called the discriminant. So let's look at kind of what that means. So the discriminant can tell us different properties about the quadratic. And so here we have b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. So when that's the case, we'll get two real solutions, which means that we'll get two x-intercepts. Okay, when b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, we're only going to get one real solution. So we're still going to get a real solution, but it's just going to be 1. And that means that we're only going to have one x-intercept. So now if our discriminant is negative or less than 0, we're not going to get a real solution. So that means that we won't have any x-intercepts. So no real solution, no x-intercepts. So the discriminant can tell us things about the quadratic kind of before we even really start. Okay, so let's start with the quadratic formula. So we want to solve 2x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0. So real quick, I'm going to go ahead and label what my a value is, what my c value is, and a value, b value, and c value. So my a value here is my leading coefficient, so 2. B is negative 5. Make sure that you always keep that negative. And then c equals 3. Okay, now that I have decided what my a value is, what my b value is, and what my c value is, I can go ahead and start plugging into this equation. So I have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that's my formula. Whenever I'm doing the quadratic formula, that's my quadratic formula. And so now let's start plugging stuff in. So I have x equals negative b, which my b here is negative 5. So I'm going to write negative and then in parentheses negative 5. Remember to always keep that negative right there. And then plus or minus the square root of, I'm always going to put this in parentheses because I'm squaring the entire value. So I'm squaring negative 5. And then I'm subtracting 4 times 2 times 3. Then this entire thing is over 2 times 2. All right, seems like a lot, but let's just break it down piece by piece. So here I have negative times negative 5. So it's like I have a negative 1 times negative 5. Whenever I have a negative times negative, I end up with a positive. So I'm just going to change that to 5. And then I have plus or minus the square root. And I'm going to go ahead and evaluate these two things in here, but I'm going to do them piece by piece. So I'm going to start with my exponents. I have negative 5 squared, which I know is 25. I'm going to subtract whatever this is. So whatever 4 times 2 times 3 is. So you can go ahead and use your calculators. I already used mine, and I know that that is equal to 24. So now I'm just going to leave it like that. So 25 minus 24. And I'm going to evaluate this denominator as well. So 2 times 2 gives me 4. So I know that x equals 5 plus or minus the square root. 25 minus 24 is 1 all over 4. Okay, we're not done yet. I'm going to draw an arrow to continue this over here. So I have x plus or minus the square root of 1 over 4. The square root of 1 is just 1, so I really have x plus or minus 1 over 4. So this plus or minus is actually going to give us two different values. So I'm going to start with plus first. So I'm going to write 5 plus 1. Oops, sorry. Should always write x equals 5 plus 1 over 4. So this is my first solution. 5 plus 1 is 6. So I have 6/4, which can be reduced to 3/2. So that's one solution. And I added here, so now I'm going to subtract because I also have 5 minus 1 over 4. So I can do that as well. So I have x equals 5 minus 1 over 4. 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 4 just gives me x equals 1. So the solutions here are x equals 3/2 and x equals 1. So I'll always get two real solutions when I'm using the quadratic formula when my discriminant here is greater than 0. Okay, so down here, we're going to determine the number of real solutions that we're going to have before we even start doing the quadratic formula. So the first one, we're going to determine the number of real solutions of the equation x squared plus 8x minus 3 equals 0. So I'm going to write the discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac equals, my b value here is 8. I'm going to put that in parentheses. 8 squared minus 4 times a. If you don't see 1, it is 1. And then my c value here is -3. Okay, now I'm going to start evaluating this. PEMDAS always tells me to do my exponents first. So 8 squared gives me 64 minus 4 times 1 times -3. I'm just doing it step by step. Now, PEMDAS, or order of operations, tells me to do multiplication next, because that's all I have left to do. So I have -4 times 1 times -3. So my multiplying by 1 doesn't really change anything, so I'm just going to do -4 times -3, and that's going to give me +12. So I'll have 64, because I'm carrying that down, plus 12. Then when I add those together, I'm going to get 76. So this is a positive discriminant. So now I'm going to look up here, and I'm going where my discriminant is positive, and I'm going to get two real solutions. So down here I'm going to write two real solutions. All right, last one. I want to determine the number of real solutions for 9x squared plus 1 equals 6x. I'm first going to write this in standard form. So I'm going to rewrite it as 9x squared minus 6x plus 1. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and write my discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac equals, my b value here is -6, so I'm going to put that in parentheses. -6 squared minus 4. My a value here is 9, and my c value here is 1. Okay. Order of operations tells me to do exponents first. When I do -6 squared, I get 36. Also, make sure that if you're using a calculator, you put this entire value in parentheses. Because if you just write -6 squared with no parentheses, it will change your answer to a negative 36. But since we're putting this in parentheses, that will change it to a positive 36. So please, please, please make sure that you watch your parentheses on these. And then we're also going to evaluate what this is. So negative 4 times 9 times 1. Again, multiplying by 1 doesn't change our answer, so I'm just going to do negative 4 times 9, and I'm going to get negative 36, which gives me 0. So now I'm looking back up here. I have my discriminant is equal to 0. So I'm looking here. I'm only going to get one real solution. So down here, I'm going to write one real solution. All right, and that's it.